So we're going to talk about work-based learning, and this data collection is specifically for the CCI. Transition work-based learning, there's two different types that are for special education, are also needed for IDEA reporting. They used to be submitted in the special education file, but the other work-based learning are just measures for college and career. All right, so work-based learning programs and opportunities, this data is collected only for grades 9 through 12. And again, like we said, it's specifically for measures on the CCI for the California School Dashboard. There's going to be 12 different types of work-based learning programs, and they're very specific. They are defined in the code set. And the WBLR was replacement processing. It may still be. I'm not sure. You know, we haven't had that confirmed. But if you're submitting records, submit them with the expectation that they're full replacement processing. But like anything else in post redevelopment, there's the potential for bugs, issues, functionality that doesn't work as we previously understood it just because of the system changes. So be flexible in your submission and give yourself time. It's a requirement to submit work-based learning for your students if you have grades 9 through 12, right? That data needs to be collected. So you're going to have a relationship with your CTE program and your special education. These are generally the two areas in which you would find most of your work-based learning students. However, work-based learning is not exclusive to CTE or special education. So students can be in work-based learning programs with any measure of curriculum throughout your schools. It's not exclusive to those, but this is commonly where you would find it. And so we have the different types. And now we've been doing work-based learning data collection for 2 years now. The first 3, internship, 10, student-led enterprise, and virtual simulated work-based learning, have additional reporting requirements, other fields that need to be reported other than just indicating those 3. And then you have registered pre-apprenticeship program and non-registered pre-apprenticeship programs. And then you have these state and federal work-based learning types. So Job Corps, Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, Youth Build Conservation Corps. Those are generally state or federal programs. And then 60 and 65 are for special education student, transition work-based experience, transition classroom-based experience. And these are included in work-based learning. This data has to be collected, period, right? The transition work-based learning and experience was formally collected as part of the special education data file. It's work-based learning so that these students can get credit on the CCI. That has to be reported regardless, even if you weren't reporting CCI, to meet the requirements of the Individuals with Disability Education Act. However, we point these two out specifically because those special education students that do not graduate, right? Typically work-based learning and the CCI collects data for students who are graduates. You can't be a dropout and be college and career ready just because you have some courses that work towards CCI. It's really specifically for those graduates, right? Well, the 60 and 65 aren't for graduates. All right. Brandy pointed out last week in the Q&A, these are for those special education students that get the certificate of completion. If you're exiting CalPADS, that would be completion status code 120. They've completed their special education program, they receive a certificate, not a traditional diploma, E23100. And so we'll just talk about some of the data collection. I think today, work-based learning online might have been targeted, but I don't know that it was implemented in functionality. If you went to the student's profile or a student's profile, and I might be able to kind of show you where that's at if you're unfamiliar. So here we have a student's detail. I call this a student profile. You see all the different containers, right? At the very bottom is work-based learning, and this is where you would input the data for the student if you're doing an online 9-to-5. And so this is in test. And so I'm pretty sure if it's not working in test, it's not going to work yet for online maintenance. So right now, if you submit work-based learning data, you have to do it through a batch file submission. The online maintenance isn't working. This is what it would look like. And even though you probably are going to submit it in a file, we show you the online maintenance view just so we could walk through the different fields. So you're going to tell us what type of work-based learning that student is doing in that given year. So it's the work-based learning type code. Right? Then you're going to report the internship ID if it was an internship. So if you use code 10 and say the student had an internship, you're going to give the student an internship ID because the student may have more than one internship. So you're going to identify that with an ID. Then you're going to tell us how many work-based learning hours that student has completed. It's important to understand these are hours outside of school. These are hours outside of their normal curriculum. To be work-based learning, there has to be a classroom component. That's why a lot of times we get questions, well, if a student works at Burger King, does that count? No, because that's not associated to the classroom at all. It's not work-based learning by definition. The kid just got a job, right? I was one of those kids who just had a job. I worked at the car wash. So that doesn't give you work-based learning. Even sometimes we make allowances for students to leave their senior year. They come to school for a couple periods because they don't have, they don't need many classes to graduate, and they're allowed to go work during school hours. That's still not work-based learning, right? There has to be a classroom component. So the work-based learning hours external, though, are those external hours outside of the classroom the student is working. And that's for the given year, not the totality of if they did it for 2 or 3 years, it's that given year. And then the state course code embedded work-based learning. This is the state course code for the classroom component. It's specifically required for student-led enterprise. It may be required, you'd have to refer to the CFS. It may be required for internship, virtual-aided, simulated work-based learning. However, student-led enterprise has to be associated with the classroom, and this is where you identify that here. They don't have to be CTE courses. They don't have to say work in the definition of the course. It could be any course. It could be work-based learning associated to computer programming, which is a STEM class, not a CTE class, or whatever course you have. It could be a home ec class, and somehow there's a work-based learning component. If you're doing online maintenance and you click this, you just have a list of all the course codes in CalPADS. And then internship employer performance evaluation code. I think it's a metric 1 through 5 of how the employer evaluated the student. And then, of course, if you have work-based learning code type 10, you have to report if the internship certificated supervisor, right? If the supervisor was certificated, or if for the internship, it was sponsored by the school district or LEA. Those are just the yes or no indicators, and they're required for work-based learning code type 10. There's not many validations for it. In the coming years, it'll be refined, but they need a couple years of data first and to evaluate the different measures, and probably they will expand in the different work-based learning types. And so before we go into the certification demo through Kyron, let's just go through a checklist of all the data that you should know that needs to be populated prior to looking at certification errors and your reports. You want to be familiar with all the reportable state course codes. Again, that's anything other than 1000 for grades 9 through 12, or if you opt to report your middle school students, that would be grades 7 and 8, not 6. Some middle schools have 6th grade. Even if they're middle school, it's 7th grade, 7 and 8. All required fields in the course, CTE, and student course and WBLR, right? And so for the course, you're going to have the content subcategory field. That's we didn't talk about, but that's a field for like foreign language, you have to specify what language it is in sub-content category, or visual arts, there's more specification in the sub-content category. The standards grade range, we didn't talk about that. That's in the data population, but you're going to tell us if it's elementary, middle school, or secondary standards. Content standards alignment, are we using current content standards, prior content standards, or if that course does not require standards? Some electives have no defined state standards, so those are required fields for every course. For your middle school grades, is it a middle school core course, yes or no? We talk about this in data population. And then whether or not, if it's an AP or IB course, if needed. That's because if it's a CTE course, does the student also receive AP or IB credit? You want to map that as a cross-reference. We did talk about that. Just ensure that your student information system vendor is reporting Carnegie units and has already done that translation. That may not be so as important as it was during the first year it was added. Also, you want to be able to identify the CCI measures, right? There are CTE completers, which students are taking leadership or military science courses. Did the students receive the Seal of Biliteracy or the Golden State Seal of Merit? That's not collected as part of end of year one, right? That's part of when you exit your student, and it's identified on your cohort reports, but that is a CCI measure. Students completing college credit, right? And then the work-based learning for your 9th through 12th grades. Again, this is a yearly completion. So if a student completes some work-based learning criteria in the 9th grade, you report it this year. If they're in the 10th grade and they do work-based learning again, you report it next year. It's a single year completion, just like the CTE. If a student's a sophomore or a junior and they become a CTE completer, you don't wait till they graduate. You report it in the year that was completed. Then when you think about the work-based learning, internship is a big one. It has a lot of additional field requirements. That's work-based learning code type 10. So it requires the internship ID, work-based learning hours external, employer performance evaluation code, LEA sponsored indicator, certificated sponsored indicator, and these are yes or no's. And then also student-led enterprise work-based learning code 15 and virtual simulated work-based learning code 20 have additional field requirements in work-based learning hours external and the embedded work-based learning course code. What is the course that this work-based learning is associated to?